Inside Belmarsh Prison, one of Britain's toughest high-security facilities, inmates are confined 22 hours a day, but the food they receive may shock you. Trays of watery soups, stale bread, and undercooked meat arrive daily, leaving prisoners hungry, sick, and desperate. Some guards knew about the unsafe meals for months, but did nothing, turning silence into neglect. When one inmate collapsed after eating, it sparked an investigation that would expose the hidden truth inside these walls. This is the real story of survival, neglect, and reform in Belmarsh Prison. What happens behind every tray is more shocking than you can imagine. Inside Belmarsh Prison, the disturbing truth about what inmates eat daily. Didn't miss out on more true crime stories. Hit subscribe, like, share, and join the conversation in the comments. It was just after lunch when the alarm bells rang in C Wing. Guards rushed down the corridor, the heavy clanging of cell doors echoing off concrete walls. In the common area, a young inmate had collapsed, clutching her stomach. Her tray lay overturned, a pale, watery soup and a piece of stale bread sliding across the floor. At first, staff assumed it was an isolated incident. But within minutes, whispers spread. More prisoners complained of nausea, dizziness, and stomach cramps. Officers called the kitchen supervisor. Panic rose as some began questioning the safety of the food served daily. Belmarsh Prison, London's high-security facility, known for housing the most dangerous inmates, operated under strict routines. Meals were served on strict schedules, often delivered cold because prisoners spent 22 hours locked down in their cells. Staff worked under pressure to maintain order and efficiency, but inside the kitchen, former employees later revealed a troubling truth. Some meats were undercooked, vegetables overboiled, and processed ingredients sometimes stored beyond safe limits. Inmates described trays that were small, bland, and sometimes visually unappealing. The same issues were highlighted in UK inspection reports: watery soups, soggy bread, and portions insufficient for the caloric needs of confined adults. One former prisoner later recalled, "It felt like survival more than nourishment. You ate because you had to, not because it was food." The young woman's collapse forced officers to open an internal investigation. Interviews with prisoners revealed a pattern. Nearly every meal carried risks of contamination, poor hygiene, and low nutritional value. Officers noted that some inmates had lost significant weight in a short period. Those with pre-existing medical conditions were particularly vulnerable. The day escalated into a lockdown. Guards closed every wing to control movement while investigators examined the kitchen, checking trays, storage areas, and cooking equipment. CCTV footage captured inmates expressing frustration, banging on doors, and shouting complaints about the food. Meanwhile, inside the prison kitchens, the pressure was palpable. Chefs and assistants, already understaffed, scrambled to meet quotas. Inspections later noted inconsistencies. Fridges sometimes failed to maintain correct temperatures, and meals prepared for weeks-old storage could be served out to wings without proper reheating. The incident spread quickly beyond the prison walls. Family members, journalists, and human rights observers demanded answers. Reports questioned whether Belmarsh's high-security status came at the expense of basic human needs. By the evening, the collapsed inmate was stabilized, but the fallout had just begun. The investigation revealed a web of issues spanning staff negligence, inadequate resources, and systemic underfunding. And then, in a confidential memo later leaked to the media, a bombshell statement appeared. Some guards had been aware of the food problems for months and had done nothing. The prison, already notorious for its strict security measures, now faced scrutiny from the public. What would the investigation uncover next? How deep did the negligence run, and how many inmates had suffered silently before the collapse? The door slammed shut on C Wing that night, but the real story was just beginning. After the collapse, the investigation moved quickly to the heart of Belmarsh Prison, the kitchen. Walking through its stainless steel corridors, investigators observed a controlled chaos. Pots clanged, steam rose in blue-tinted light reflecting off metal surfaces, and exhausted staff moved briskly, attempting to feed hundreds of inmates on strict schedules. Inside, former employees revealed a troubling pattern. Food arrived late, sometimes after being stored improperly, and portions were consistently insufficient. Meat deliveries were occasionally undercooked, and vegetables were overboiled to the point of tasteless mush. Some trays included processed foods that had sat in cold storage for days, while bread often went stale before reaching prisoners. Investigators documented that staff shortages created a system where corners were cut. One former cook admitted, "We were told to get it done, no matter what." Sometimes meals went out without proper checks. CCTV footage showed trays leaving the kitchen, some looking almost identical from day to day, uniform, pale, and unappealing. Guards, meanwhile, delivered them mechanically, often with minimal engagement with the inmates' complaints. Inmates described meals as more than unappetizing, they were harmful. Reports of stomach cramps, nausea, and headaches were common. Some prisoners relied on outside packages for nutrition, while others rationed the small portions they received. One former inmate recalled, "The soup was watery, sometimes cold. It wasn't food, it was something to fill the tray." The investigation widened to include food hygiene practices. Inspectors discovered inconsistencies. Fridges sometimes failed to maintain proper temperatures, and frozen items were occasionally thawed and refrozen. Cross-contamination risks were high, and cleaning routines, though scheduled, were sometimes skipped due to staff shortages. While this scrutiny unfolded, prisoners' testimonies painted a vivid picture of life inside Belmarsh. Many were locked in cells for 22 hours a day, relying solely on the food provided. In such isolation, the quality of meals directly affected morale. Complaints to officers were frequent, yet often dismissed. Staff knew of recurring issues, but did not act decisively. Tensions began escalating inside the prison wings. Inmates refused to eat, skipping meals in protest, while others openly expressed their frustration by banging on doors and shouting. The investigators noted that even small acts of defiance in a high-security environment like Belmarsh were significant, reflecting the level of distress caused by daily food routines. The scrutiny also revealed an alarming contrast. While some prisoners received proper attention, others, particularly vulnerable inmates with medical needs, suffered in silence. One diabetic inmate described how inadequate meals disrupted her blood sugar management, creating medical risks. Another noted that overboiled vegetables and undercooked proteins left her weak and malnourished. And then came the shocking revelation. Internal emails leaked during the investigation suggested that some guards had deliberately ignored complaints to avoid paperwork and maintain routine. The issue was not just poor food, it was systemic neglect. As the day ended, investigators knew they were only scratching the surface. The kitchen seemed ordinary, the trays mundane, but the consequences were anything but. How far did the negligence reach? How many inmates had endured silent suffering? And, crucially, who would finally be held accountable? The question lingered over Belmarsh that night. Was this collapse just the beginning of exposing a prison-wide food scandal? The following morning, Belmarsh Prison was quiet, but tension hung thick in the air. Investigators returned to the wings, clipboard in hand, cameras capturing each tray as it left the kitchen. Every meal now carried scrutiny, from pale soups to unappetizing slices of processed meat and stale bread. Officers moved carefully, aware that the smallest misstep could ignite another wave of complaints. Former inmates who cooperated with investigators painted a shocking picture. They described trays that were not only nutritionally inadequate, but sometimes unsafe. One woman recalled finding tiny fragments of packaging in her food. Another described meat that smelled off, cooked inconsistently, and served cold. These accounts mirrored official inspection reports that had previously criticized Belmarsh for inconsistent food hygiene and lack of nutritional value. The investigation uncovered a pattern that was more systemic than anyone had expected. Staff shortages, combined with high-security routines, meant the kitchen operated under extreme pressure. Meals were prepared quickly, sometimes bypassing safety checks, and trays were delivered with little oversight. Inspectors noted that this routine had persisted for months, leaving countless prisoners exposed to potential health risks. Meanwhile, the internal emails leaked to the press revealed a chilling fact. Some guards had been fully aware of the substandard food and ongoing complaints. Rather than escalating the problem, they chose silence, prioritizing routine and paperwork avoidance over inmate welfare. The revelation sparked outrage among advocacy groups, journalists, and families of inmates. Public scrutiny forced the Ministry of Justice to promise reforms and independent oversight. Within the prison, the atmosphere was tense but cautious. Inmates watched investigators closely, some quietly hopeful that their complaints would finally lead to change. Others were wary, having spent years enduring similar conditions without recourse. Officers continued to deliver trays, now under a microscope, while the kitchen staff worked with renewed urgency. Every step was a reminder that the previous negligence had consequences. The scandal prompted a deep dive into other aspects of daily life inside Belmarsh. Investigators reviewed how long inmates were locked down, whether meals met minimum dietary standards, and how complaints were logged or ignored. What emerged was a picture of a high-security facility struggling to balance strict confinement with basic human needs. By evening, the findings were compiled into a report that would eventually be shared with policymakers, prison administrators, and the public. It revealed that the food failures were not isolated incidents, but a reflection of systemic neglect, underscoring the urgent need for reform. The final revelation came from a group of inmates who had documented the daily routine for investigators. Photos of trays, notes on portions, and detailed accounts of missed meals painted a vivid, undeniable picture. The prison's food system, they proved, had been failing for years, quietly harming those most vulnerable. Belmarsh Prison had long been notorious for its high-security measures, but now it faced a new notoriety for failing to meet the most basic human needs of its inmates. The scandal sparked reforms, increased oversight, and a nationwide conversation about what life inside Britain's toughest women's prison truly meant. As doors clanged shut that night, one fact was clear. The collapse, the complaints, and the investigation had exposed a disturbing truth. Every tray mattered. Every complaint counted. And in a prison like Belmarsh, silence was no longer an option.